I'm Cassidy Quinn, and this is Mentally Together. Because whether you can see it on the surface or not, we are all just trying to keep ourselves mentally together. And no matter what our brains are experiencing, we're not alone, we're together. We talk a lot on this podcast about asking for help when you notice that you are really struggling with your mental health. And that can be a really hard step to take. First of all, actually noticing, oh, my brain really does not feel good right now. And then second, actually saying out loud to another person, I can't or don't want to do this alone. For me, it was almost 3 years ago when I noticed that my brain just felt really sad and anxious all the time. I was crying every day, I couldn't focus on what I was supposed to be doing. Every single task, everything in my life just seemed overwhelming. I remember one day when I was supposed to go meet up with a couple of friends to float down the Willamette River here in Portland, which is like a fun thing that you do in the middle of summer. But for whatever reason, the depression and anxiety, every part of that day seemed impossible. Like where we were gonna park, what time we were gonna leave, what time we would get there, what time we would leave after we get there. Like, oh my gosh, how many hours are we gonna be there? What will I eat while I'm there? What will I drink while I'm there? What do I need to bring? Every single thing was a lot. I almost didn't even make it out of the house to get there because of a panic attack. And that moment really stood out to me as, okay, this is supposed to be fun. And clearly it is not, so now I'm at the point where everything that's supposed to be good and happy and fun in my life is actually anxiety-inducing, and I think maybe that means I need some help. So I asked my friends for help, who I knew had gone through something similar before, and then they encouraged me to ask a doctor for help, which I went there, answered a bunch of questions, talked to her for a while, and she prescribed me some antidepressants, which I'm still on today, and for me, that works. And I feel so lucky to have been able to ask for help and then receive the help that I needed. But what happens when you ask for help and then the help you receive isn't what's best for you and your brain? Unfortunately, that does happen. You're prescribed the wrong medication, diagnosed the wrong mental illness, or given the wrong treatment, and that can be really dangerous. And that is one of the huge things we are talking about with my guest today, because that happened to her husband. And now she has devoted her entire career to breaking down the stigma around mental illness and changing the system. It's Sheila Hamilton. Sheila is a 5-time Emmy Award-winning journalist who has told stories on TV, on the radio, in print, basically everywhere. She is the host of her own podcast, Beyond Well with Sheila Hamilton, which helps listeners build a toolbox for living better. Side note, her podcast was a huge inspiration for me starting this podcast, which you will hear me tell her in just a minute. She's also helping people build that toolbox through a new web series called Chasing Chaos, which she hosts on Facebook with the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Clackamas. But Sheila found her way to the mental health world because of a horribly tragic and traumatic experience. Her husband David took his own life only 6 weeks after he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, a mental illness that she had no idea he was dealing with just a few weeks before. Once David finally asked for help, he was sadly given the wrong help. Medications that made things worse, not better, and inpatient treatment that basically took away his rights and all of his loving human connections. Sheila wrote a book about this entire experience. It's called All the Things We Never Knew: Chasing the Chaos of Mental Illness. It is so heartbreaking, but it's also beautiful because she has learned so much since then. And now she's hopeful that not only can we change the system, but also how we approach our own mental health. One thing she's really passionate about is catching people early on in life, before the trauma and mental health struggles, to prepare us all better for, life. I loved talking to Sheila about what she's learned about bipolar disorder, some of the misconceptions around suicide and mental illness, and what she hopes the mental health system will look like someday. So, let's get into it with the smart, the resilient, the inspirational Sheila Hamilton. Thank you so much for being here and doing this with me today. I so appreciate everything you do
Oh, Cassidy, same. Right back at you. And welcome to this incredible world where you're going to
Thank
be a
you.
podcaster, a mental health advocate. I am super thrilled that you've decided to take this up as your singular passion because I think you're going to be phenomenal at it. So thanks.
Thank you so much. I told you this, that your podcast was a huge inspiration for me. Even the day that I'm releasing the episodes of my podcast, because I don't know what days you always record your episodes of Beyond Well, but our episode was a Monday morning.
Yeah.
And I was like stressed out before I got there. I was rushing to get there, like, oh my God. And then I was late and I couldn't find parking, and I'm sorry still. But then after I left, it was the best start to a Monday that I can remember having in a long time. I was like, this is so great. We are just talking about our feelings. We're having a real conversation. I didn't
Yeah.
feel rushed. It just felt so nice. And I was like, I want to do more of this. This
No
is
kidding.
great.
Do you know, when we sat down that Monday morning, I was so struck by how many similarities that we shared, both in our career, in our sort of creative endeavors, and also not so much me anymore, but in our perfectionistic traits. And that,
That's nice to hear you say not so much for you anymore.
no, I've really
There's
worked on
hope.
it. Yeah, I've really worked on it. And I was like, I so hope Cassidy finds a way to be able to center herself on the things that bring meaning to her,
Oh,
because
thank you.
ultimately that is the way that you kind of live a more balanced and joyful life. And until you do it, and until you decide that you're important enough to make those changes, people really, really struggle. So
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And it really kind of puts an explanation of like the last year of my life into perspective. It's like, oh, yep, that's what I'm doing. But
yeah.
Sheila, as usual, has the perfect words to describe it.
Well, no, I'm really happy because I see so many people that kind of understand in their heart what they should be doing, and they have an inkling that they want to do it, but they're very fearful to make the change.
Ooh.
And I will tell you, if you can find a way to do it in your 20s and 30s before you have a family, before you're bogged down in, a mortgage and everything else, you are going to be so much happier the rest of your life. So,
Yeah,
way to
that
go.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Your podcast, yeah, thank you for welcoming to the mental health podcast world. When I was thinking about starting this podcast, of course, in my brain, I'm like, Sheila's podcast, Beyond Well, it's so good. It's so thought-provoking. It's so informational. Like, how am I going to do this? I can't be Sheila. And then, of course, as I think all of us in the creative world that are putting work out into the world go through, you go, oh, I'm doing it in my own way. We're all
Yeah.
different. The way I
Yeah.
do things is going to be different than what Sheila does. And one of the big things that differentiates your podcast is that you have co-hosts that are doctors and psychologists and therapists. And that adds such an interesting and clearly useful perspective. I would imagine
Yeah.
you've learned a ton just from
Oh,
having them in the studio with you.
do you know, Cassidy, when I was in my 30s, and I write about this in my book, but I went through a horrible, horrible trauma. And I did not have time for therapy. I didn't have the money for therapy because it was also financially devastating. I didn't have even a moment where I could think about my interior world. And so I feel like I'm getting the education that I wish I could give to every 16-year-old kid.
Oh
I
my
feel
gosh,
like
yeah.
every single week when I sit down with these doctors and all of the people with lived experience, that I myself am getting like a master's degree in well-being. And
Yeah.
so it's been so, I don't know, it's been just like my love career. It's been, I guess I had to wait this long to get my love career, but I
Aw.
have loved it so much. And I am so passionate about it that I never, ever get tired of it.
How would you describe Beyond Well with Sheila Hamilton for anyone that hasn't listened to the podcast yet?
Well, I think it is a place where we can learn more about our interior lives and about the things that truly bring us joy and well-being. And I'm not talking about, going to a $2,000 cleanse camp. I'm talking about truly learning the tools where you can learn to balance yourself and take good care of oneself and try to spread that kind of joy to other people. And we do talk a little bit about managing mental illness, but really my hope is to catch people before they have trauma, before they need support, so that they actually have these tools of resilience that they can bring into any trauma that they might experience.
Yeah, that makes so much sense because, I mean, you've learned through listening to your podcast and reading your book that being proactive, whether you're a teenager or an adult, like the earlier you can get treatment or just start being proactive, even if you're not like, I
Right.
need treatment right now, but just knowing what works for your brain and figuring out how to keep it in a good place, right?
Yeah.
Is that kind of the idea?
Well, also, I think I was raised in a family where we didn't talk about feelings. We didn't talk about how to manage anxiety. There was no sort of framework for how to deal with your interior life. And so I learned it through books in my early 20s. Of course, I was really attracted to people who were talking about this kind of thing. My sister became a Buddhist priest, and I learned some tips through her. But then when I went through my own traumas, I realized, oh man, I got to this place in life without having a toolbox for my internal world. And all these other people who've been willing to go through therapy and being willing to kind of do the difficult work of understanding who you are and what you really need are way advanced. They're way better off than I am. And so I just decided to start a show so that young people could learn these tools free and easy.
Yeah. And every episode focuses on something different. So there's really always something to learn. Every time I listen to it, I never know exactly, the topic based on the title or who you're talking to, but then there's always so many surprising things that pop up along the way. So what are some of those things that are now in your toolbox that you've learned?
Well, first of all, I had no concept about the idea of this internal voice that we all have. And mine was incredibly bitchy and very judgy and really demanding that I do things perfectly and do things better and do more than my coworkers or more than fellow students. And so I was the quintessential 4.0, involved in every activity and just like ramming myself through this hole that really didn't fit me. I mean, Cassidy, when I was a kid, I was writing children's novels and staring at clouds. I was super creative, but kind of dreamy and dopey. And then I narrowed myself into this place where I really wasn't myself. And it's because of this internal voice of I wasn't good enough. I wasn't fit enough. I wasn't pretty enough. All of those things. And I really learned how to recognize what that voice is doing, to tell it to fuck off, which is super helpful. And I think also to learn to have a little bit of compassion for where that voice comes from,
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's internal, but it also, I would think, comes from external sources too, right? Like it's coming there because that's kind of what you're told, whether it's actually verbally told or just subconsciously to be perfect and that you're not good enough and that you need to do more.
Yeah. Yeah. And, my family was super competitive. We were raised in this atmosphere of, we were all sort of rodeo cowboys and on, I know, bizarre background, but from the time I was probably 8, we were on the rodeo circuit. And, if you weren't bringing home a trophy or a medal or a winning pot, you weren't kind of seen as good as the other. And so I learned that winning was supposed to be the thing we were supposed to do very early. And it didn't serve me as I got older. Of course, it was fabulous for my career because I was the most competitive, driven, ridiculous robot I've ever known. I mean, I would take the hardest story and I would follow it until there was nothing left to do on that story. I just had this inner drive that there was always one more person to call. There was always one more thing to do.
Like you made it more complicated and harder.
Yes, I did.
Man, yep, I do definitely see the similarities.
Yes, we have so much in common. I really recognize myself in you, but that doesn't serve you as you get older. Because really what is most important, I believe, in a happy, healthy life is, do you feel good about yourself every day? Are you making a contribution to society that you're proud of? Is there a way for you to enjoy your family and your friends every single day? I'm not talking about just leaving it for that 2 or 3 hours on the weekend, but I'm talking about truly having a life of balance. And I did not have that life of balance, and it ended horribly.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you've
Figured
found
it
that
out.
balance and figured that out. I mean,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my hope, honestly, is just to say to people, can you be super honest with yourself about where you are? Can you have that conversation to say, am I truly doing what I love most? And is there any way for me to inch closer to what it is that I'm passionate about? Because
yeah.
we stay stuck in these wheels for all of the external things that we get from it, whether it's better money or better security. But in the end, what really pays off is when you are so passionate about something, so that every day you look forward to doing it, that people recognize it and go, oh, you are super good at that.
Yeah. I like that you say inch closer to what you're passionate about too. Like you don't have to just, oh, well, I want to do that. So if I can't get there tomorrow, then
Right.
screw it. It's not worth it. Like you just
Yeah.
a little inch, just 1 inch
Oh,
at a
yeah.
time. I love
I'm
that.
not encouraging people to leave their jobs, really, especially not now, because until you have that next plan, until you have it set forward in a way that you feel really strongly about, it's kind of too scary to do all at once. So
Yeah,
making these plans, being deliberate, but working toward it, inching toward it is a really good idea.
totally. I love that. You've hinted at your trauma a little bit, gone through
Yeah.
huge traumatic event in your life. And it's been interesting to me talking to different people so far on this podcast who are, quote, like mental health advocates. And no one is like, I came to be a mental health advocate because my life was perfect and I want to tell everyone else how to have a perfect life. And so I'm going to do this mental health thing. Like, no, everyone, it always comes from something really difficult, maybe traumatic, something really hard that if they could take that back, obviously,
Yeah.
if you couldn't have found your way to a mental health advocate because of this trauma in your life, maybe that would be better, right?
Yeah.
So as you talk about in your book, All the Things We Never Knew, your husband was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and ended up taking his own life.
Yeah.
And how did you get from that place to somehow turn it around and go, you know what, I want to help people feel better?
I was so struck, Cassidy, by how little I knew about what he was going through, how, in any kind of normal education, you learn where to go when somebody breaks a leg or has a heart attack. We know exactly how to access the medical system. We know exactly what it is. You can go and look at a million YouTube videos about open heart surgery or how there's hardly anything like that for people with mental health crisis. And I felt like I was a reporter who had gone to so many lengths to understand 10,000 different topics quite deeply, but I knew nothing about mental health. And I felt like, as a reporter, shouldn't I turn my focus on something that could be more meaningful to people, And I really wanted to write the book, first of all, to normalize the experience of suicide loss because, 52,000 families a year experience it. And this concentric circle of people who are affected by it involves 9 to 12 different people. That's a lot of human beings. And then if you think about the number of people who are attempting suicide, it's 25 times that number. And all of those people have the same need I had to understand how they can help someone who's going through a mental health crisis. And so I felt like, oh, there's an audience there. It's not very well served.
Yeah.
And I'm a person who knows how to take information and deliver it. So that's what I did.
Right. Because there's the people that are struggling with suicidal ideation and going through that in their own way. And then, like you just said, everyone around them, anyone that is left behind. And in your case, like you just explained, like you didn't even know 6 weeks before he was gone.
Yeah.
You didn't even know what he was struggling with. Right.
No. I mean, I think it's still such a travesty that in our school system that we don't have a dedicated track for learning about our mental well-being. The brain is the biggest organ in the body. It gets sick just like other organs in the body. It can also get better if we know how to access support and help and ask for the kind of treatment that we know now works.
Mm-hmm.
But it has been so stigmatized and so pushed under the blanket like it's something to be ashamed of. And that's really what I hope to do, is just say no. I'm super positive about stigma around mental health ending, Cassidy, because of young people. I am just like, I think in the next 10 years, we're going to look back and say mental health was stigmatized.
Yeah.
Really? Breast cancer was stigmatized? What? I mean, I really do believe there will be a time when we can just say, oh, that was such a weird time when we couldn't talk about depression or anxiety.
Right. Because I feel like we have made some progress, especially over the course of 2020. Anyone that didn't understand struggling with anything mental health related, everyone was like, oh, this is what it's like to be sad and anxious all the time. Okay, I get it. But at the same time, when it comes to the stigma, I feel like a lot of times you hear about a few specific mental illnesses. You hear about depression, you hear about anxiety, you probably hear about ADHD. But when it comes to something like bipolar disorder, I know that I personally, that's one that I don't hear a lot about.
Yeah.
And so there's like the poster children of mental illness, like the poster illnesses. You're like, yeah, it's cool to be sad and anxious, but we don't know this bipolar thing.
That's exactly right. And I refer to it as kind of sort of like the walking well. If you're depressed, you can still walk around, you still go to work. Yes, it's all right. We understand you have depression. People with anxiety tend to be super creative and fun and actually very productive. And so they tend to be cool to be around. But people with bipolar disorder are more difficult. Their moods are really difficult to understand. Their behaviors can appear like somebody being kind of a stubborn ass. And it's so much more difficult than, if you want to talk about schizophrenia, that's the one that's truly stigmatized. Nobody really wants to talk about schizophrenia. Yeah. And so that's, my hope is that we look at them all as, we're all on the spectrum of wellness. And some days you can be really not doing well. You can wake up and have lost your job and feel like you're alone and it's raining outside. And you can, if you took an internal monitor, you'd say, I'm not doing well. And there's other times that we're doing really well. And to tell you the truth, what divides those people who are pushed over into serious mental illness is not that much different. It's a family background, a genetic vulnerability, and trauma. And all of us can suffer trauma. And so I say, we should all be super humble about mental health, critically aware of our own mental health and where we are, and really capable of understanding what tools can make us all feel better. So,
yeah, absolutely. What do you wish people knew about bipolar disorder? You said a couple of things right there, but I'm sure there's a million things that you have learned along the way.
Yeah, I mean, some of them more, I think, like the things that truly surprised me was I thought, okay, well, if my husband had bipolar disorder, wouldn't he have been super weird from the beginning? Wouldn't I have been able to tell that he was like that in his 30s and he would have some strange behavior that I would walk in and find him doing something mentally ill? Not at all. He was brilliant and charismatic and super capable. He was running a design build business and he was just what I think of kind of like the type of man every woman finds interesting, artistic, creative, business minded, really responsible. And then all of these different stresses started adding up on him. And it was only then that I saw his mental acuity start to really fade. And it's not like it faded and then it was away. He would go through particularly stressful times where he wasn't tracking. He was highly disorganized. He could not make sense of even his general accounting for his business. And then he would get better. And so I wouldn't push to go get treated or push to go see someone. And then he would fall again because, for instance, his father died and that was a huge trauma for him.
Yeah.
And I just think people should understand that mental illness doesn't present itself as like one day you don't have it and then the next day you do. Going back to that spectrum idea, people are pushed further and further along to the point that the brain is just overwhelmed with toxic stress and they can't cope anymore. And so I wish I had known that there were techniques kind of for offloading the stress, that we could have got him help that was short of inpatient psychiatric care, that there were things we could have done that might have helped him before he was feeling suicidal.
Yeah. And that's another statistic. Your book is full of so many personal stories and so much emotional storytelling, obviously, but then at a lot of the ends of a lot of chapters, there's information and statistics and helpful facts and things for caregivers and all kinds of things surrounding mental illness. And one statistic that really stood out to me was you said that 50% of people with bipolar disorder do, I don't remember if you said they complete taking their own life or they attempt to take their own life.
They die by suicide. It's a sobering, it is one of the most sobering statistics I've come across in my research. And that is because when people with bipolar disorder get into that rapid cycling where their moods are vacillating between extremely manic down to really, truly depressed, it's almost as if the psychic load is so horrid. It's like my husband described it as being in Dante's ninth circle of hell. He just said, I can't even begin to explain what it's like to have no control over my mood, my behavior, how I'm acting toward the people I love. And I think that that's the reason that the suicide rate is so high, is that rapid cycling is not a good thing to ever have to experience.
Yeah. And the rapid cycling is when you're going back and forth between like
The moods,
manic state, the mood swings and right.
Yeah. And, the interesting thing about bipolar disorder, Cassidy, is that most people who have a slightly hypomanic type bipolar disorder 2, they can operate really efficiently. They're the employee that everybody loves because they have more energy than anyone else. They seem to be having the capability to manage like 12 to 15 projects, and they're really good. But the first time they experience depression, it is such a deeper depression, psychiatrists have told me, than just major depressive disorder, that they have a really hard time climbing out of it. And somebody described it to me as, this spectrum of our brains where they actually kind of have more bandwidth. So think of on the highs, they have this, incredible energy and sexuality and creativity. The low is also worse.
Yeah.
The low is deeper than horrible. Then they have to look at what they've spent, the relationships they've damaged, the trouble that they've gone through when they were on the manic spree. And I think that psychological coming to Jesus is also part of the reason that there's more suicide attempts.
Wow. Yeah. That is heartbreaking and also makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And obviously you talk about therapy and getting that kind of treatment and help and being able to open up and talk about it. But then there's also another component of medication being used to treat mental illness. And personally, I feel super lucky and grateful because I have been prescribed a couple of different medications for my depression and my ADHD, and it's worked. I've only had positive experiences, but that is not the case for so many people.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like I live in a little bubble where I'm like, oh yeah, like meds, they totally work. It's great. And then, but there's a huge risk to being prescribed the wrong medication for a lot of people, right?
Which is what happened to my husband. He refused to get help, mostly because his family had kind of told him that mental illness is a farce and you should pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But when he finally did ask for help, he went to a physician friend and said, I'm not sleeping, I'm super depressed. And instead of doing a really good, thorough evaluation of him, he just put him on an antidepressant. And for people with bipolar disorder, antidepressants can be super scary. I mean, he went into what is called a state of akathisia, where he had this jittery inability to sit still. He didn't sleep for probably 18 days before he was finally hospitalized.
Oh my gosh.
He would bounce out of the house and go on like 9-mile hikes and just be sweating profusely because he was so anxiety ridden. He began kind of rocking back and forth. And so it's so important, if you've had any history of sort of lows and highs, to get that evaluation before you begin on any kind of antidepressant.
Yeah. And so is that what you would recommend? Like people call, like for me, I know I went to my regular primary care physician. I was like,
I know.
hey,
Lucky.
really sad. I think I'm anxious. They had me fill out a little questionnaire. I know I told you this whole story on your podcast. And then they were like, oh, okay, on this scale, you have depression and generalized anxiety disorder. Here's your prescription. Also, if you would like to get therapy, here's someone to call. And it was kind of as simple as that, but it wasn't a super formal process of like, let's go through a whole, and luckily it worked for me. But like, how does it, how should it work?
What I would say is if you can get in to see either a licensed therapist, a psychologist, or a psychiatrist, almost always better than just a GP, because what they did for you is what they do for the majority of people. And that's great when it works. It's not so great when it doesn't work. I think what the difference is if you have a family history where you're like, oh, remember Aunt Melda and how she would like run off to Jamaica every May and she'd come back with a different boyfriend and then she was spending a lot. So if there's any kind of inkling that there's been bipolar disorder in your family, that you have any kind of family history, I would go straight to the experts and bypass GPs. I know GPs are so great and they've saved so many people right now, but it's a crapshoot if you happen to have the gene for bipolar disorder.
Which is so important. And like I said, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that's a thing. And even myself going through the ADHD diagnosis the past few months is like, oh, that was totally missed also. Like my depression and anxiety probably stem from my symptoms of ADHD, but that was missed for 31 years.
Right. I know. So wild. You know, it's interesting for me though, having watched you, like in some ways you were able to use your ADHD to your benefit.
Totally. Absolutely. Even, I mean, I complained about like live TV deadlines when I was doing my show. I'm like, I hate it. Has to start at the same time, no matter what, every day. Oh my gosh, it's not ready. But now working from home and freelancing, I'm like, oh, I have to set some deadlines or things done. So that actually kind of helped for my ADHD. So totally. I mean, same thing you say about people with anxiety, like being creative and fun to be around. Like some of them you can make work for you as long as, you know, but then there's always trauma and there's always things that can make it turn, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's a really delicate balance.
And what you say about family history also makes so much sense. And I know that that's a lot of conversations you've had to have with your daughter. Obviously losing her dad, there's a lot of conversations that have to come to the forefront about mental illness immediately, whether you're ready or not. But I'm sure, has it changed how you guys talk to each other moving forward and how you try to talk as a family and just get things out?
Well, my daughter just completely, you know, she's just like, you are so obsessed with mental health, Mom. I mean, it's one thing to, you know, put in words what happened and try to help people, but to devote an entire career to it, you know, so she teases me mercilessly. And, you know, I'm constantly reading like psychiatric journals and papers, and she doesn't really understand it. I mean, her relationship with her father was just so wholly grounded in love and fantastic memories that I think that she chooses to just ground herself in all of the goodness that he brought her. And she really does not deal with the other parts of it very much. I mean, she didn't want to read my book. I had written it and didn't want to publish it until she'd read it. And so I think I finished it when she was 12, and she didn't read it until she was like 17 or 18, and we were on a flight together, and she said, I'd like to read it. And I had to sit there during the entire flight, like wondering what she was thinking. And she said, you got it right, Mom. You know, you really captured who he was and how wonderful he was. And so she's super supportive, but I think she also just is with a wink and a nod, like, oh, you crazy person.
Watch, in like 15 years, she'll be like, you know what? I'm going to make my career about mental health too, Mom.
I doubt it. Very seriously. I think she just thinks I've got it covered for sure.
Have you been putting off a visit to the doctor for way too long? Yeah, I do that too. And when I finally do call and make an appointment, the doctor's office usually tells me the next available appointment is months away. That's why I've started going to Zoom Care. With locations in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Colorado, Zoom Care offers same-day doctor visits that you can book online or from their app. Yep, You don't have to talk to anyone on the phone. They even offer mental health visits, where you can speak to a board-certified mental health provider in person or through video. Zoom Care is where I went last year for my ADHD diagnosis, and they made the process so simple. They really took away my stress. So if you're ready to make an appointment of your own, head to zoomcare.com. That's Zoomcare, ZOOMCARE.com. I love plants. You probably already knew that. But as of just a couple of years ago, I was convinced I would forever be a plant killer. That is until I met the plant doctors. They're two women, Chelsea and Skylar, in Portland, who love helping people and businesses figure out how to care for their plants. And they sell cute plants and adorable plant pots, too. They have brought lots of green beauty into my house. And they just launched something super fun, a plant club. They're calling it the Clean Air Plant Club. Because, fun fact, plants actually do clean the air. For $20 a month, your subscription will get you a new 4-inch plant every month, plus 10% off all workshops and 10% off anything else you buy when you go pick up your plant in person. Go sign up for the Clean Air Plant Club right now at theplantdocs.com. And while you're on their website, if you feel like you need a new plant right now, which, let's be honest, you probably do, use the code Cassidy for 15% off your order. Again, code Cassidy at theplantdocs.com.
Now, back to the show.
What are those things that you do, whether it's on a daily basis, weekly, whatever, to bring yourself joy?
Well, I have been like really fondly happy during quarantine because I like having sort of my people around and my pets around. And so I try every day to make sure that I'm meditating, even if it's only for 10 minutes when I wake up. It's just sort of like a brain reset for me of concentrating myself on my breath and being present, and also sort of like a gratitude check for, shit, I know we can't go to a restaurant, but what else do I have that's working, you know? And then I exercise every day. I know that I'd be super depressed without it. I have to. I cannot leave that to something that I'll do on Saturday. Even if I just crank up the music and just dance like a banshee for an hour, I call it exercise. And
it is.
Yeah, it totally is. And then I know that most people won't like to hear it, but I really love to have a glass of wine at the end of the night. I feel like it's something to look forward to while I'm cooking, that it helps me sort of shift into, okay, now it's not work hours for me. And so I have tried to monitor that and keep it at one glass, but I do have a glass of wine and I really love it. And then I also, you know, if I look at my week and I haven't reached out to friends either with a phone call or a what are you watching on Netflix or something, then I know that I'm letting my work get way too much of me. And so I'm constantly checking in with my friends that way.
Trying to keep the balance, like you said, of the work and personal life. You talked about the voice inside your head earlier.
Yeah.
Does it shut up now? Like,
oh no, I mean,
still yelling at you?
The bitch is back all the time, right? I mean, she's there. And I honestly don't think that even the work that you have in cognitive behavioral therapy of recognizing it and sort of reframing makes her go away. That's why I've said that I've developed a kind of more like friendship with this person. Like I know how she served me at what time in my life and why she was there, but I'm way quicker to recognize when I'm doing it and way quicker to tell her, like, it's actually time for you to leave the party now. I can cope with you later. I'll deal with your concerns in a later episode. Right now, you need to back off. And I actually, you know, what's helpful is not trying to resist her, not trying to make sure she never comes into my life has made it easier when she does show up, like, there's that neighbor who's always stopping you and wanting to talk for 25 minutes when you just need to go get some milk. So
like she means well. The neighbor means well, but we just don't have time to talk right now. It's okay.
Exactly.
Or the bitch is back.
Exactly.
Reading your book, I know I keep just going back to your book, but it is amazing and it's heartbreaking and emotional and beautiful all in one, however many page long book. You talked about how it took you a while David was struggling to realize that you yourself needed help, that you were struggling at the same time. And I'm sure that's something that so many people who have a partner, a loved one, a friend, a family member that they see struggling, and all of a sudden that's your whole life is I need to help them, but you can't help yourself. You hear people talk about it in relationships, like until you love yourself, you can't love somebody else. But I would think with mental health, you can't necessarily fully help someone else if you're not.
It's so interesting too, Cassidy, because it's a topic that isn't very popular, because everyone thinks that when someone is going through a mental health crisis that you're, suddenly like this angel who has unlimited capacity and unlimited patience and unlimited resources. And the truth is, you're very much at risk for your own mental illness, caring for someone with a mental illness, because it is completely unanticipated, the level of toxic stress. It's super expensive. It is so time consuming, and your life is in tatters mostly because of the up and down chaotic nature of what mental illness does to families. And I remember having, and this was when David went missing for the first time, I had this thought when I was driving back from looking for him in the Columbia River Gorge. I wish I would get pulled over, and I wish they would put me in a hospital. I wish I could just have somebody help me for a few days to just take this burden from me, to take all of the difficulty that I'm having. And, up until that point, what I didn't realize is my own resources, asking for help, asking your family to come stay with you. I hadn't done any of that. I was still so hoping to try to figure it out on our own. And that's where it left me. And then when David died, I had an enormous financial debt. I had the grief of my own loss, my daughter, who was only 9 at the time, who had just lost the man of her dreams. Her daddy was always just the most considerate and creative and loving guy to her. And I was getting ready for work, and all of a sudden my heart started pounding and I was sweating all over profusely and I couldn't breathe. And I realized I was having my first panic attack. And I remember thinking, I have got to get some skills for how to deal with my own mental health. I have got to focus everything that I'm trying to learn about what happened to him. I need to focus now on myself. And I think that this is probably a really familiar pattern for people who love someone with a mental illness, that it takes you down to your core. It takes you down until there's almost nothing left of you because you've given so much.
And then at the same time, you're trying to work and support the family and keep it all together so that you can afford the treatment and afford all these things and try to keep them okay. What advice would you have for anyone who might notice that their loved one is struggling and trying to take care of themselves at the same time?
Well, I wish I could say to everyone to do the first thing that I ended up doing quite well into my crisis, which is tell people and ask for help. I mean, when I finally asked my accountant to come help figure out the books, when I asked my sister to come help with Sophie, when I asked my mother to come fold underwear and socks because the laundry was getting so out of control, when I asked my friend who has dogs to please take the dogs on a walk, that's when my life started being able to kind of piece itself back together. And I think we all, because we're all raised to be independent and really try to be as self-sufficient as we can possibly be, don't want to do that. But the strain on families that are going through mental health crisis is so great. And it's so different from families who are going through cancer or a heart attack, or that I would just say, please ask for help and frame it in exactly the way that if, David was going through, heart disease, I know you'd be here with a casserole. Can I ask you to do the same for us now?
Yep. Yeah. If he had heart disease, if he was going to chemotherapy, if he broke his leg, you'd come drive him around because he can't walk anywhere.
Right. Yeah.
And the same thought process needs to be applied to our brains too.
Right. Yeah.
You also, David did go get treatment in the form of inpatient treatment. And it seemed you have learned a lot about the workings of the mental health system and the downfalls and the places where it needs to be improved. What do you wish would happen with the mental health system? Like, what do you envision if it could be better?
So like if I were just Queen and I could say, here's what should happen to people in crisis.
Queen Sheila gets to make the rules, gets to reform the whole system.
I think the first thing that would be so wonderful is to, first of all, meet people upstream of the crisis so that everybody begins talking about this and can identify when things are going wrong, and they all have a language for it and everybody knows where to go if you start, and everybody gets their own therapist and it's paid for, right? Mm-hmm. That would be awesome.
I'm in. Perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
You have my vote for Queen.
I really do wish, Cassidy, that the first thing that could have happened for us is to have peer support, which I believe is a phenomenal tool for helping people normalize what's happening to them. And that is just someone who has been through what they've been through. Look, I was where you are. I was suicidal. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I'm back with my family. I have a job. You're going to be okay. That is so huge. If just one human being who had gone through what David was going through could have spoken with us, that would have been phenomenal.
Because you did talk in your book about people who have struggled with suicidal ideation, and anyone who, if I'm remembering correctly, anyone who's made it through that and been on the other side, no one is ever wishing
that they could do it again.
They had died.
Right.
Yeah. And no one even in that instance was thinking, I want to be dead. I want to be dead.
Yeah.
It's just.
No, I mean, most of the people that you talk to that survive suicide attempts, the vast majority will say, thank God I didn't die. Yeah. I don't know what was driving me in that moment of impulsive behavior, but wow, I'm so glad that didn't happen.
So just hearing from someone who can tell you that.
Totally. Yeah. And then secondly, I really do not believe that a system in which takes away people's will, their rights, their ability to actually define their own health standards is helpful to patients. I mean, I would be so much more in favor of the systems like they have in Europe, where people tend to try to stay in their homes as long as they can. The physicians and the support come to the home. They work with them to establish a routine where they can get better in the comfort of people who love them, and they try to matriculate them back into the workforce as quickly as possible. And so it's much more normalized, and there's not these institutionalized no windows and glass across the nurses, and you take away your belt and your shoes. It's horribly distressing for the people who go through it.
Yeah.
And I really do believe that we need to find a way to use medicine as more like a screwdriver than a jackhammer. The United States is just phenomenally well known for just layering drug after drug after drug. And in David's case, he had 13 drugs in his system in 4 weeks. And he said he just felt like a lab rat. There was really nobody who provided any kind of hope for him. And that's why the final piece would be always to have recovery as the pinnacle. Recovery, that actually you can have this crisis, you can be diagnosed with this thing, but you know where we're going to get you? To the point where you can begin living a life of joy and meaning again. I mean, what they told him, and this has really changed in the time that he's been there, is they told him, you'll never be able to work again. You should really consider giving up custody of your child. This will be a disorder that you'll need to manage your entire life, and it will only get worse. And I think they effectively made him feel as if his life was over. Yeah. And so having people in the mental health system who actually believe in a patient's ability to recover is huge. It's just like a sea change in thought. And it's about having optimism and humor and people with lived experience coming in and saying, you can do this. And so is that list too long? I mean, that's a lot of things to ask for, but I believe in all those things. I think all of them are super, super important. And
they all, you say that list and none of it is shocking to me. It's not like, oh, we can't do that. No one should have thought, no one would have thought of that. What? Like, it makes so much sense. And it seems, I mean, giving people hope, like, why is that such a crazy concept to keep hope as an end point in or as a constant in mental health treatment.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems.
Yeah. I mean, you think about it in every other aspect of our lives. When we have an illness, we are told, here are the steps that you can do to recover. Here's what you'll have to do to manage. Here's what, diabetes, alcoholism. You can think about all the chronic conditions people manage and still maintain really delicious lives. And I have been so disappointed that this hasn't become more important for the mental health industry. To say to people, we value you as a human being. We know you can recover and have a meaningful and joyful life.
Yes. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hallelujah.
I'm like, oh, let me just remember that. I'm going to keep replaying that. That is a beautiful sentiment. Queen Sheila, I'm, yep. If we could vote for you to be queen, not that that sounds like it would be very stressful for you. So you can just like tell.
Once again, back to the hair. I'm not anything that makes me have to do my hair.
Normalize queens with ponytails.
There you go. Yeah.
You're watching the video of the version of this podcast. Sheila's hair looks beautiful today, just for the record.
Right.
I also want to talk about your new web series that you just started releasing, Chasing Chaos.
Yeah, we partnered with NAMI for this just because I think that during COVID, more people are super aware of their mental health. I mean, we have kind of a 60% increase in people self-reporting anxiety. So, hi, Cassidy, your tent just got bigger, right?
Woohoo!
So
it's a club.
Yeah, it's a super good time to bring people's stories forward. And what we've been doing it is with these two intentions, love and levity. So we're calling it Levity. Because I really believe, Cassidy, that conversations about mental health are always, so this one isn't, but they're always so soft tone and quite depressing. And people are really speaking in very almost like we're at a funeral. And I thought, no, we can talk about mental health and have fun. We can actually laugh about our struggles just as we laugh about every other struggle we have in life. And so we're bringing that forward, hoping that people like it, that they participate, and that they share it a lot. So
totally. And I love levity. That's a really great word. But that's exactly my thoughts on mentally together. It's like a lot of times you read super clinical papers or have these super serious conversations, and we need to get to the point where we can just have random conversations. One of my friends that I've never talked to about mental health the other day, after she saw me launch the podcast, messaged me and was like, do you know a good therapist in Portland? And I actually sent her the link to the Beyond Well website. I was like, actually, Sheila has great therapists. I don't know if they're taking new clients, awesome. But go listen to Sheila's podcast.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Great, but we had never talked about our mental health, and I never knew that she was struggling with anxiety and wanted to go talk to a therapist. And just the simple act of going, it was a DM on Instagram. It wasn't even a big thing, a big conversation. I'm sure it will lead to more, but it was just like, hey, do you have a therapist? Oh, cool. Now I know that we have this open space and that you're open to talking about your mental health. So cool. Now we're good. Now, whenever we're
awesome
hanging out, that can be a thing that we just bring up, and instead of making it this huge thing that we put up as this giant cloud that, oh, is this going to be the day that I talk about my anxiety to somebody? No, it's every day.
What's fascinating about that is now I've been doing this show for 2 years, and I would say I would boil down, if people wanted to okay, Sheila, what are the 3 things I can do for my mental health?
Yeah.
And one is move your body every day in a way that's joyful to you. Don't punish yourself with exercise, but move your body. Have someone that you can talk to openly about how you're doing and share your secrets. And it doesn't have to be a therapist, but it must be someone that you can actually talk about your mental health with and say, this is the day I'm really struggling. And what do you do when you're feeling like your skin is crawling off of itself? You have to be able to have those conversations. And then I really love this one around sleep and eating, because we tend to separate our physical health from our mental health. But unless you are sleeping, unless you're actually kind of letting the brain control, alt, delete every night and take out the garbage on itself, it's not going to do well. So anytime that you can look at those pillars, those 3 pillars, am I moving? Am I eating and drinking? And am I talking to someone? It makes mental health way more simple to me than people make it. Because it really is, if you think about it in terms of prevention, super, super simple. It's when we get in crisis that it becomes much more difficult.
Yeah. I even remember from your book saying, like, we need to, if you can reach people before this is an extreme, but before they lose contact with reality,
right,
and being able to go, this is real versus
yeah,
this is what's in my brain, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the studies around first time psychosis are super interesting because the sooner you do the interventions, the sooner you help someone gain back sort of a reality based center. And the more you can prevent those second and third psychoses, the less brain damage they have. And so you can actually, even if a person has heavy genetic loading for something like schizophrenia or bipolar, if you actually help them in the beginning, you give them kind of this, all right, here's what we know you need to do for your well-being. Here's your checklist for how you're doing. And I have a friend who he's super, super sick, but he knows when he's getting into that area where he might be hospitalized, and he just backs himself down. He just backs himself right back down to the point you'd see him at the grocery store. You would never know he has a mental illness.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, people do extraordinary things by being able to learn what actually works for their own brains, and yeah, I mean, we do all this stuff. We get personal trainers for our pecs, but we don't have personal trainers for our brains.
And we'll spend money on that. We will spend money to buy fancy shoes. So we want to go running and new clothes, or pay for the personal trainer. But then you go, therapy's kind of expensive.
Yeah.
I don't think, and obviously there are so many people that the financial barrier is huge to being able to get treatment and go see a therapist. But if you are paying money for your personal trainer at the gym, maybe do that for your brain as well.
Yeah. And there are, like, even if people just want to DM me for resources for free help, I have so many resources, especially in the area where we live, for free mental health counseling. I just don't think it should ever be a barrier what you can pay or not pay. So
yeah, absolutely. Back to the list of things Queen Sheila could change. If you're loving this episode of Mentally Together, you might be curious, what goes on behind the scenes? Which parts of the conversation were left on the cutting room floor? Well, let's talk about it. Over on Patreon, my patrons get to see deleted video clips from every episode and get to be the first to ask questions of each podcast guest. And every month, I host an exclusive live stream for patrons only, where we actually get to hang out and talk to each other. Not that you necessarily needed another Zoom call in your life, but this one is fun, I promise. Oh, and as one of my patrons, you get every episode of the show a day early, on Sundays. You can read all about the different tiers and sign up at patreon.com/Cassidy Quinn. Again, that's Patreon, patreon.com/Cassidy Quinn. Now we have a quick round of questions.
Oh yeah, yay!
Are you ready for the the Sheila?
I love it.
Round?
Yes,
okay.
I am.
When is the last time you cried?
Well, does crying in movies count? I mean, I actually cry in trailers. So the night before last, I am a super emotional crier. I'm really moved, especially I think when I'm in touch with my feelings. And so in movies and in trailers, quite often I am a crier.
Trailer. That's a good trailer if it can make you cry. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
When's the last time something happened that you just had a huge belly laugh?
Well, I have this new puppy, and it's a sort of a hilarious story that my partner wanted to get a puppy who we thought was going to be like quite big and masculine. And, so it was sort of like this mix between a doodle and a Bernese mountain dog. And he ended up with these hilariously short little legs. He doesn't look at all like, and when he runs, he jumps like a rabbit. And so last night I was once again belly laughing at the fact that I throw the ball for him and he literally like goat rabbit jumps across the floor. He's the most precious, but very interesting little sentient being I've ever met. So that was it.
Mental health
last
tip,
night.
get a puppy. What is your favorite podcast to listen to that's not yours?
Well, now it's going to be
or
yours.
Mine. No,
I'm a total freak for the Daily. I think that they do such a phenomenal job of explaining what's happening in the news without being sensational or without being, one-sided. And I also really love Pod Save America. I mean, I'm such a political animal that I tend to spend my time on podcasts learning about politics and what's happening in the world. And then I don't know if you know of this podcast, but it is phenomenal. And it's the Token White Guy, and it's hosted by a really funny Black comedian who has one token white male on her show every year, and the rest of the time she just has conversations with her friends, and it's really wonderful. So
wow, I'm gonna have to look into that one. The other two, love them. The Daily is thank you, New York Times, for making the news accessible, really, and approachable. What are you grateful for right now?
I'm so happy that my daughter has a boyfriend that she's been able to quarantine with. I don't, this is weird to say. I'm so grateful for my daughter's boyfriend, but he's so supportive of her, and he's been her buddy, and it's kind of kept them both safe. And they ski, and they're still going around and finding unique, very safe ways to attempt to travel. And I'm just super grateful for him.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Sophie's boyfriend, you're wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's listening. What sound can immediately calm you down or bring you joy when you hear it?
Wind. I love the sound of wind. I mean, I don't know if it's because I was raised in a relatively windy area, but if there's a windstorm, I open the windows and I just listen to it. I love big windstorms.
What about a smell that does the same thing?
And I've been making these chocolate brownies, like COVID brownies.
Yes.
there is nothing that fills the kitchen with as much joy as a COVID brownie, man.
That's one of the other questions. What's your biggest guilty pleasure? Would it be a COVID brownie?
Yeah, I tend not to try to overdo it, but I have one a day just because I feel like it's COVID, it's quarantine. Yeah. What else are we doing here?
One brownie, one glass of wine.
Yeah, I want to look back on this time and say, I actually managed to have a really good time during quarantine. I want to just kind of have a memory of me of going you were pretty cool during that time. I didn't see you lose your shit that often. And I'm so far, so good.
What is the best thing you do for your mental health?
I do think it's probably the meditation and the kind of mindfulness. I really effing hate to unload the dishwasher. And with COVID, we're just all cooking and cleaning. And so what I decided to do is adopt this kind of series of mindfulness toward the things I really hate doing. And so when I unload the dishwasher, I'm okay, here's that plate and it's coming out and I'm setting it down gently. And now the next plate is coming down. And I timed myself and I thought, well, when I do it in a mindful manner, it's going to take so much longer. The difference is 2 minutes.
Whoa.
Between my chaotic, I effing hate this, I'm just going to get it over with, and wine glasses are breaking. And so I have been just attempting to try to do that sort of daily mindful activity on stuff that I formerly really hated. And so when we finish, I'm going to go try it on my laundry and see if it comes out any better than it did before.
It's funny because my strategy, it's still being mindful towards those chores in a way, but it's also kind of the opposite in a way, because instead I go, I can watch a show, or I can listen to a podcast, or listen to an audiobook while I do that thing, and then I'll put the dishes away or do the laundry. If I can treat it as the relaxing time, yes, I can sit and watch some stupid reality show, then I'll fold the laundry.
Oh, that's nice too. Yeah, that's super nice. But I have noticed that for my mental health, those little breaks where sometimes in between Zoom calls, I just go oh yeah, my butt is in this chair and my shoulders are a little tense, but okay. And then if I'm really kind of stressing, I will just lay down on the floor and let my dogs come just attack me and lick me and sort of bring me back to my body. And so I think in quarantine, it's super important that we're kind of doing those check-ins with our body a lot throughout the day.
Totally. Side note, but when you meditate, do you use an app or do you just do it in your mind?
I just in fact, I was really awful with apps, that when I knew I had to go on an app and listen to somebody else do it, my daily occurrence of mindfulness was like the worst it's ever been.
Wow.
Because it was something I had to do versus, okay, I wake up, I don't even get in some lotus position or light any friggin' candles or put on a, robe. I just lie there. And for the next 10 minutes, I just kind of let everything and really concentrate on my breath. And it's a super simplistic way of thinking about meditation, because other people would say, you're cheating, you're lying down, but it doesn't matter how you do it.
Nope.
It really doesn't, as long as you're just truly concentrating on your breath. And I think that is a really positive way for me to start the day.
Yeah. And it's different for everyone. For me, like, I love the app because then I don't have to think about, like, what am I going to think about? I'm just going to listen to the app. Great. But yes, then sometimes it does tell you, like, oh, you've done it 2 days in a row. Or like, I've been here in 2 weeks. I'm like, oh God, sorry. So yeah, I can see how it would also add some stress to it in the app too.
It's like Peloton. I really hate the leaderboard, and I really hate them showing what I've done or not done. I'm sort of like, I'm just here for the music. Like, stop, judging me. So
right, yeah.
Those devices are not my friend, really.
On the opposite side, what is the worst thing you do for your mental health that maybe you need to stop doing?
I think the worst thing I've done for my mental health is get too much time online. I mean, and I think everybody can kind of relate to that I really love TikTok. I think that the creators on TikTok are the most creative people in the world right now. And I can just be scrolling. And 3 hours in, I'm like, oh, these people are so creative. And I'm just like, and here's that voice, like, you're a failure and you're not, And so I just don't do it. I give myself like, all right, okay, I'm going to look and see what's, and maybe show on somebody else, watch it with somebody else. So it's engaging with someone that you love, and then turn the friggin' thing off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Totally. I fall into like mental health TikTok and it's great. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Everyone's talking about their brains.
Yeah.
What is your favorite thing about your brain?
I love that I still have that, 7-year-old in me. That girl who still believes it's possible to write a novel, and the person who still really thrills at the shape of a cloud. I mean, I'm super dreamy now that I've kind of returned to my authentic self, and I feel like every day I just got closer and closer to the girl I was when I was 7, and she's pretty cool.
That's the best. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's cool. Oh, I love that. When do you feel most yourself?
Oh my God, I love to write, Cassidy. And if I can get in that thing where I have, written 3 or 4 good pages of prose, I'm super, super happy. I have that thing that you do when you're skiing where you're just totally in flow and you forget what time it is and you forget everything about the exterior world and you're just in your body creating. And that's what writing does for me. So,
ooh, yeah. What's something you're really good at that people might not know?
I'm a hella good horse rider because I'm really good at barrels and pole, and I'm pretty good at roping. That's all so that cool. Early stuff, from the American West does not die easily. So I'm pretty good at that.
That's so cool. Last question. Feels very ridiculous asking an accomplished award-winning journalist such as yourself, but if you had to get something tattooed on your forehead, like
forehead,
Queen Sheila would do a lot of great things for the world. Queen Cassidy would just cause total chaos. So everyone's getting forehead tattoos now. It's like your billboard to the world / yourself in the mirror. What would your forehead tattoo say?
Oh my God. I mean, I love the idea of just yes,
Ooh.
I love yes, because it really, it's so changed. I mean, yes was sort of what took me through the most difficult times in my life. Like, yes, I have a life to live because my daughter deserves to be happy and healthy and prosperous. Yes, I can take care of myself because I'm worth it. Yes, to starting a show because I believe that mental health matters. Yes, to coming on Cassidy's show because I like her as a human being. Like, so I like the symbol of yes as, what do you really want to do with your life?
Yeah.
Not just saying yes to everything. Like true yesing involves a lot of knowing, right?
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to go out drinking. No, I'm not going to do karaoke. I'm really shitty at it. But yes, to the things that bring you meaning and joy, for sure.
That's beautiful. That's so simple. Is there like an exclamation point, a period, like just the letters?
Oh my God, I never thought about a question mark. I think that'd be pretty good to ask people, like, what are you saying yes to?
Ooh, yeah. It inspires conversation. Totally.
Yeah. I love it.
And then last but not least, where can people follow you or your projects, Chasing Chaos, all the things? Where should they keep up with Sheila?
So, like, one of the luckiest things is that I'm actually Sheila Hamilton on every single platform, on
Amazing.
Twitter, on, TikTok, I'm on every single platform. I'm not good at all of them, but I am on every single platform. And then the podcast is at Beyond Well with Sheila Hamilton. So,
yes. Perfect. And is there anything else that I didn't ask you about or things you wish that people would know about mental health in general?
No, I just am really encouraging everyone to try to put your podcast on that list of things they listen to every week. Like, I love people having conversations about this, and normalizing the idea that we all suffer from time to time, and we all have that naggy bitch at the back of our head who wants us to be better than we really need to be. I think what's really important is to kind of get back to that kid that you were when you were at your most creative and most joyful. So make that a goal.
I've heard people say, like, you'll be the happiest if what you end up doing with your life somewhat reflects what you wanted to do when you were, I think 10 is the age that I've heard. It's like, yep, that makes total sense.
We're going to have a lot of firefighters. Remember, like, all the men, all the boys. Yes, I'm going to be a policeman or a firefighter,
Right. Cool. Everyone go fight the fires. Sounds great.
Totally. Exactly.
Well, thank you so much. Oh my gosh. Learning so much from you as always, just hearing you talk. And it's always fun to hear what's going on with you.
Best of luck, Cassidy. I'll be sharing your podcast wide and far for people. I'm really proud of you. Yeah. Thanks again.
Thank you. And thank you, wonderful human, for listening to this episode of Mentally Together. We release new episodes every Monday, so I, Cassidy Quinn, will see you next week. In the meantime, go do something nice for your brain today. Go make some brownies, drink a glass of wine, listen to an episode of Beyond Well with Sheila Hamilton, or watch her new web series, Chasing Chaos, on the Nami Clackamas Facebook page. Whatever will make your day just a little bit better. Because remember, we are all just trying to keep ourselves mentally together. Mentally Together is produced, hosted, and edited by Cassidy Quinn in collaboration with Koba FM, a podcast network that is all about community, baby.